We are doing a 6-part series on the types of power by French and Raven, the power bases. And in this video, we're looking at coercive power. Hello there and welcome back. I'm Alex Lyon and this channel is called Communication Coach. And we are here for your professional development. I specifically speak to emerging leaders. And one of the issues that we as emerging leaders need to have a handle on is the types of power that we have at our disposal. What kind of tools do we have in our toolbox? You don't want to get stuck just using one type of power when you have lots of ways to influence the people around you. And stepping back more generally, French and Raven talk about power as social influence, the ability of the leader, person A, to do something or say something that will get the follower, person B, to comply, to change their beliefs, their attitude, or their behaviors. And one of the ways to do that is through coercive power. In the last video, we looked at reward power, and coercive power is the other side of the coin. Briefly, coercive power is the leader's ability to punish a follower if the follower does not comply with an influence attempt. In other words, I have asked the follower to do something, and he or she has not done it, and so I give them a punishment. Coercive power can also be the threat of punishment. Certainly that is an aspect of coercive power. They know, because I've said, if you don't do this, X is going to happen, then you want to avoid that punishment, and so the power works. So coercive power has a couple of sides to the coin. The first side is giving somebody a punishment that they do not want. So you're giving them something they don't want. For example, a written warning in their file. That might be embarrassing and they might not want people to know they haven't performed well. You could give them extra work as a punishment. You could put them on a project that they don't want to do because it's hard work, really hard work. You could also do something that sounds like, quote, yelling at them. You could just verbally tell them, look, you did a bad job and you shouldn't have done that. And that is a kind of punishment because we don't want to be, quote, yelled at. There's an opening to The Simpsons, and every opening on that cartoon, The Simpsons, they show Bart writing something on a chalkboard over and over again. That's an old-fashioned punishment they used to do in school, making people account for. They won't do whatever behavior again, and they have to write it maybe 100 times. That's a punishment because you're giving them something they don't want. Coercive power can also be taking away something that they do want. So that's a type of punishment. Maybe you take away their freedom, their privileges. You take them off of desired projects that they really want to be on. Parents do this kind of thing all the time. We might say, if you don't clean your room, then I will take away your screen time. I will take away your video game time. So that's taking away something that they do want. Let's look deeper into the characteristics of coercive power that can make it more or less effective. And the first thing that makes it somewhat effective is the size of the punishment. Now, clearly, people will care more if the punishment is big, and they will care less if the punishment is small. There was an episode of The Office where Dwight wrote up a demerit for Jim for being late, and they went through this long sequence of what does that even mean? And a demerit equals 3 of those equals a citation, and then 5 citations is a violation, and the list went on and on. And basically, these punishments meant absolutely nothing. The size of the punishment was so small that it just didn't matter. So size of the punishment matters. But what matters even more, according to the research, is the certainty of punishment. So size of the punishment does affect your judgment, but if you're certain that you will get punished, then you're much more likely to comply, even if the punishment is a bit small. So we can see this all the time when we're driving on the road. Like if you've ever exceeded the speed limit, you've probably done it because you have a very low certainty that you will get a speeding ticket. If every single time we went over the speeding limit, we got a ticket, we were certain that we would be punished, then we would not speed as much. So certainty, they say, matters more than the size of the punishment, which gets at another aspect, a really important aspect of coercive power, and that is it requires surveillance. The leader has to keep track of whether or not people are complying. They have to build systems of surveillance and control to make sure everybody's doing what they're supposed to do, because we will not comply if we think we can get away with it, like the speeding ticket. So it really is a kind of labor-intensive, high-maintenance approach for leaders to use. If you spend all your time investing in this coercive power, punishment, and surveillance, it's time you could spend doing something else. And so unlike reward power, in that video we talked about how it's win-win because the leader gets to give the rewards and the followers get to receive the rewards and everybody's happy. Coercive power, I personally see it as lose-lose, because as a leader now I'm playing the bad person and I'm giving you punishments, and as the follower you're receiving punishments. So it's really lose-lose. I just don't see the benefit. So is it effective? That's the other question people ask. Is it effective? And French and Raven say, well, it can be in the short run. Maybe if you really need something, you can punish people if they don't do it. But in the long run, it's not going to work out very well for the leader because it's a lose-lose equation. So eventually they'll just go elsewhere. If all you use is punishment, they'll just find some other place that they're not going to be punished. So let's apply this to our professional lives. And I'll talk about this a little bit as a teacher. I don't really have a lot of use of coercive power when I do consulting, but as a college professor, I do use a little bit of coercive power, mostly for late assignments. So what I have done is try to balance certainty and size of the punishment for late papers to make sure students go along with it. So what I do is I take off 10% per day for a late paper. If I only took off 1%, then I would get a lot of late papers. If I took off 50% or 100%, like didn't accept them at all, that might be a little harsh. But I have found that 10% is about the right size deduction to motivate people to hand things in on time. And then what I do is I make sure it's certain that they will lose 10%. So in the course of a semester, I have numerous assignments, and I take off 10% for any late assignments on the very first assignment. They're just getting to know my expectations, and I have to enforce it. But I figured if I enforce it when there's very little points overall in their grade, that first assignment might be a small assignment. If I enforce it then they will follow along with the rules and they will start handing all their work in on time. So it really ends up helping their grade if I enforce it with certainty in the beginning. So that's how I use coercive power. I really don't use it any other way except for late assignments and absences. If the absences add up, I will take some off their grade. So that's how I use it. And I'm wondering how you might use coercive power and what your thoughts on this type of power. Certainly it can get a little controversial if you overuse it, but it is important to know how and when you might use it more effectively. So before we go, I have two items that I wanted to talk to you about. The first one is that the next video in this series goes into legitimate power. That's another one of the 6 power bases, so stick around for that one. And the second thing I wanted to offer you is a free resource, a PDF download. There's a link in the description below this video, as well as in the first comment, in the comment section that's pinned there. And it leads to a free resource called the Essential Professional Communication Skills that every leader should have. And it's a PDF download where you follow the link, you put in your email, and then I email you this download. And they're the kinds of skills that really every professional should possess, and that's totally free. So I encourage you to check that out. So thanks, God bless, and I'll see you in the next video on legitimate power.